something that we've been working on for a while now, and we're so happy that we've got it going and ready to present to you. This is the inaugural of the Port Aransas lecture series, and I've been working with a couple of organizations, and I'm going to allow.
Is it not live yet? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
And I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. Ray Mooney from City of Port Aransas.
Hello, I'm Ray Mooney with the City of Port Aransas Nature Preserve. We hope you enjoy the presentation.
And Sarah Cunningham.
Hi, I'm Sarah Cunningham. I'm the Coastal Training Program Coordinator at the Mission Aransas National Estuarine Research Reserve here in Port Aransas. We hope you enjoy this.
And this lecture series will happen once a month on the second Friday of each month from 2:30 to 3:30, and we hope that you enjoyed the topics that we have selected, and always welcome your comments. A few things that we need to point out: if you have questions, please feel free to type them into the chat as our presenter speaks today. Our presenter comes to us from Texas A&M Forest Service. Bill Green is a regional community forester, and he's going to talk to us today about tree care in urban landscapes. Are you ready, Bill?
Yes, sir. Hello, everybody. And my name's Bill Green. Work with Texas A&M Forest Service with all of South Texas, Coastal Bend, Rio Grande Valley. And we're going to go over a bit of tree talk today. So with arboriculture and the care and management of trees, we'll just mention that with the Texas A&M Forest Service, it's not that big of a state agency. It's only 500 people. There's that work with fire. I'm in the group for community forestry, regional forester. And then there's also with land management up in East Texas and some different departments within the Texas A&M Forest Service. So like I said, I'm with the community and urban forestry, and want to see how we do today, looking at a couple different things. We're going to talk about why we take care of trees and how to take care of trees. So why do we take care of trees? Because trees are good. So that was a pretty simple answer to the question. And trees are good. Trees are good for our economy and for other money issues and the value of the trees. Trees are good just for our environment of our earth, and trees are good for our health. Okay, and then after we go over those things, we'll talk about how to take care of trees, and the answer to that one is don't kill them. Take care of trees, and we'll look at taking care of the crown, the branches, the leaves, taking care of the trunk, mostly focusing on the trunk flare, where the trunk swells out just at ground level, and a couple important things there. And then we'll talk about taking care of the tree roots. So if we're all ready, and anyone keeping track of the chat, just let me know if there's a time to stop or question to come in, and please break in and ask questions. So the first part, why take care of trees? Because trees are good. With our money, our economy, and what the trees, the value of the trees, what they do for us. I think everyone has an idea that trees increase the property value and between 10 and 20%. So if you have a house and a plot of land with trees on it, it's worth more than if there aren't trees. So money's good, trees are good. Trees help save energy in our homes. In South Texas, you know, with the air conditioning bill, just having shade trees around your house, it can change a lot your electric bill each month. So trees help us out with that. And something you might not have thought about as much is trees in the urban areas where cities, towns have stormwater systems. The trees reduce the amount of water that goes into those stormwater systems. Communities, cities, towns are really beginning to see the value, like city managers, planners, on having more trees just so that the stormwater system doesn't get overwhelmed. They can reduce the size needed for a stormwater system if they have more trees in the urban area. So that also helps save each town, city a lot of money with their budget and just having less problems with their water system, stormwater system. Another one that's a little bit strange is there's research, I guess we'll believe it because it's supposed to be really good research, that areas, neighborhoods with trees, there's less crime there. Now, maybe you got some guesses how that works. What I've seen in the research is just sometimes bad people looking for places to commit crimes. They see an area with trees, a neighborhood with trees, and they say, oh, this neighborhood's nice. They're probably taking more care and being more careful and have better control. So somehow trees also help reduce crime. Okay, so also trees are good. And just for the earth, our environment, everyone's talking a lot now about the climate change, global warming, all the problems we have with the carbon in the air and the ozone, and trees help out a lot with that. I think some of the benefits of the trees for the earth, you have ideas of. The trees, through the leaves with photosynthesis going on, take in carbon. So that's less carbon in the air, less problem with the ozone, and they're stored in the wood. And then during that photosynthesis, they're also releasing oxygen. So oxygen's good for us, and they're taking the carbon dioxide that's bad for us. And that way they help clean the air. Also, not just with taking in carbon and releasing oxygen, they also clean the air of particles and different pollutants. And the trees help reduce with all those things going on climate change and just the problems the earth is having now. Another thing with our environment is just the trees providing habitat, obviously for birds, but other animals too. Just trees in cities, towns, and especially out in wildlands help a lot with the wildlife. Okay, there's a lot of research going on now just how much trees are good for our health in a lot of different ways, and we'll go over quite a few. Just the trees around a neighbor or an area, just the sound bouncing around, sound waves, there's a lot less problem with sound. Like if you're near a highway, trees would help reduce the sound from that, and just less noise is good for our health. Trees help clean our water, like mentioned, with cleaning the air, also cleaning the water, so we have better water into our water systems and just better groundwater around. And trees, being out around trees help us reduce stress. Actually, quite a few other things like blood pressure, just being around trees is good for our health. And then, like mentioned, that trees shade on houses help reduce the cost of electricity, but also trees, just being outside and in the hot South Texas weather, you got some shade, you go run for the shade and get out of that sun. So there's a movement going on, an initiative that's nationwide called Healthy Trees, Healthy Lives. And like mentioned, the trees, some of the benefits for improving our health, they absorb pollutants from the air. When you are sick, it's been documented in hospitals and with doctors that there are sick patients, they get well faster even if they can just see trees from the windows in their hospital rooms. That's been researched. And then getting out and spending time in nature helps people get better faster, and also that they need less medication. And this has all been proven and documented. Okay, so when you're around trees, your blood pressure is lower. less stress. It's just, you feel better out and around trees. Another benefit of the trees, and trees are good. And another one that's interesting is that they've done research, and women that are out in nature more spend more time out with trees and nature, hiking, exercising. They have better birth weights for their children. And like I mentioned, in the hot sun, it can be up to 20 degrees lower in temperature. So go grab that shade when it's the hot South Texas sun. And when you're around trees, you actually get sick less often. And like I already mentioned, when you are sick, you get better faster. That was quite a... And of course, being less directly in the sun, you have less problem with your skin. People that spend time around trees also just feel like and do more exercise and get out hiking, walking, and doing exercise. So, and it's been shown also kids that spend more time outside with nature around trees, they do better at school, better grades, better attention. And then we get fruits and other good fruits and good things to eat from the trees. Got a crazy computer. And that, like we said, the trees clean and filter the air, and that's good for our health. Okay, going to see how this goes. Let me know if the sound's coming through for the video. If it doesn't work, we just won't show it, but let's give it a try. So this is about a clinic, a health clinic in Conroe, Texas. That the clinic there is writing prescriptions and having their people like a written prescription, not to go get medicine. Well, they might have that also, but also you got to spend an hour outside walking around, spending time in nature and with trees. So let's see if we can play the video. I think, let me try. So it's working, Kevin?
Dr. Daniel Porter from Lone Star Family Health Center. We're a federally qualified health center out of...
Yes.
Dr. Daniel Porter from Lone Star Family Health Center. We're a federally qualified health center out of Conroe, Texas. We serve 90,000 patient visits a year. And I try to write a prescription for nature instead of a prescription.
Sorry. This time it should be good.
Dr. Daniel Porter from Lone Star Family Health Center. We're a federally qualified health center out of Conroe, Texas. We serve 90,000 patient visits a year. And I try to write a prescription for nature instead of a prescription for drugs. We have a printout that comes out of our electronic health software, choices for them in terms of local things that they can go explore. And then we try to get them to commit. Even if it's just once a week, please go spend an hour outside. A lot of mental health issues we care for out of this clinic too. Depression, anxiety. As a primary care doctor, you start wondering, what else can I offer my patient rather than just giving them the next pill? To create the first Nature Explorer classroom at an FQHC in the entire country. So that's one aspect, is the prescription. The other is that we try to do a walk with it off program once a week. So we encourage our patients to join us at the local park. We're walking with a doc, and we start with a 10-minute presentation on a health topic, and then walk for about an hour. And you're walking with your doc. More and more data is showing that when we have access to natural space, when people spend more time outside, we get reductions in those diseases, and they get treated better. As the science progresses, that's what I buy into. That's what I'm bred to do, is to listen to science, and I want the proof, and I want evidence that it's working. So as a primary care physician, I'm trying to take care of the whole patient and the whole family for that sake, and that boosts the health of that patient and boosts the health of our community.
Okay. Let me see if I can. I think we're good. All right, it's a little bit funny to get the video going, but somehow I think it worked. Let me know, anybody, if it wasn't working well. So with that first part, the benefit of the trees are good for our economy, for different money issues, for the earth, and for our health. Now we're going to get into more of the taking care of the trees. The main point is don't kill them. You want to take care of them. I think if we understand how trees grow, function, and a few important issues to be aware of, take care of, we'll be able to take better care of the trees. So we're going to look at the crown with branches, leaves, pruning with the trunk, especially the flare, a couple issues important with that, and then at the root system. Okay, so we're not going to kill the trees, we're going to take care of them. And looking at the crown, the trees, when there's an injury with the trees, it's not that the trees seal or heal over, like when we get cut, our tissue heals over, it grows new tissue. The trees don't heal, they seal a compartment all the way around the wound. And then we'll also look at pruning and how trees grow and produce energy. So trees don't heal, they seal. So they surround a wound. The wound will always be there, they just contain it so that it doesn't let decay and disease get into other parts of the tree. So that wound will be there, it's just sealed up, down, inside, outside, the compartment all the way around it. And that's called coated, just for the official name with tree work, the compartmentalization of decay or damage in trees. That's coated, so that trees don't heal, they seal around wounds. There's the 4 different walls, up above, inside, outside, and then just sealing completely all around the wound. So looking at pruning, Alex Shigo, well, he's no longer alive, but he was very good, important with research on taking care of trees and the pruning. And one of his quotes is, pruning is one of the best things an arborist can do for a tree, but one of the worst things we can do for a tree. So if you do it wrong, you're doing a lot of damage. And just the idea that you only prune when you have a good reason to. So pruning is the most common tree maintenance work. Good pruning is done only when there's a good reason to do it. You don't prune just because it's that time of year and you have to go out and prune. You only prune if there's a good reason, and we'll go over those reasons. And bad pruning does a lot of damage. So with pruning, prune when there's a good reason. If there's risk, a branch over an area where there's people, or the branch is weak, or there's some cracks or weakness, and it's a high risk, that's worth doing the pruning, and you reduce the risk, might have to prune off some branches. If there's branches that are rubbing or other issues with branches and it's affecting the health of the tree, then you prune the branches. Sometimes it's worth doing some pruning. You want to not prune over 20–25% of the tree at one time. If you have some aesthetics or something that you just want to make the tree look better, you might be able to do it some one year and some another year to not be removing too many branches at one time. And always removing dead and broken branches, especially hangers, just because of the danger they present. So when you're doing the pruning, use the right tools, the right safety, and be careful. And then we'll go over what's called the 3-cut method is the right way to remove branches, prune branches. When pruning, don't remove more than 25% of the branches, the leaf area during any one season. So like I said, you might break it down and do some this year, do some next year. Don't prune within a utility line, AEP. If there's branches within utility lines, AEP is responsible to do that pruning. And any tree worker, any arborist, certified or not, unless they're utility certified, like AEP foresters, you're not supposed to work within 10 feet of a utility line just because of the danger. Don't leave branches or stubs. You do clean cuts, and we'll go over about the branch collar, where you make your cuts. No flush cuts. There it goes again, the crazy computer. And something that used to be done is painting the wounds. Now it's been shown that the tree seals better around wounds if it's not painted. It's not like the paint does a lot of bad damage, but it's better to just leave the tree seal and take care of its own wounds. The only exception to painting is with oak trees in areas where there's oak wilt, then you do paint the wounds. But with all other trees except oaks in areas where there is oak wilt, and we don't have that in the coastal bend, you don't paint the wounds. And don't strip out the inner branches. It's tight. We'll show some pictures of lion's tailing. It's too common. I think some tree companies, tree workers, they think it's the way you're supposed to make the trees look, but you're taking off all the inner branches, just leaving balls out at the end so it looks like a lion's tail. We'll show some pictures about that. Then just in general, if you do pruning on small young trees instead of large mature branches, it's a lot easier for the tree to recover from the pruning. So basically, if you can, even on older mature trees, if you're doing any pruning and it's tree or branches less than 4 inches diameter, that's going to be easier for the tree to handle with the pruning. If you have to, sometimes you do have to remove larger branches. It's going to be hard for those older mature trees with large branches for that to seal over well from the wound, but sometimes you have to do it. So to do the pruning, it's called a 3-cut. The idea is that you don't want to just make one cut and then the branch is falling and strips down bark running down the trunk. So you do cut 1 underneath, just a small cut out a bit from where you want your final cut. So you do that first cut, cut 1, a little bit underneath, cut 2, you take off the majority, the major portion of the branch. Now you just have a little stub there and you can work with it. You don't have all the weight of the branch. So after the cut 1 and cut 2, most of the branch is gone. And now with that stub, you don't leave stubs. Now you do your final cut, and you do that cut out at the branch collar. It used to be cut flush with the trunk. Now it's shown that the tree seals over and recovers from the wound a lot better if you do it at just outside the branch collar. Some trees you can see the branch collar easier than others. Sometimes you have to sort of just guess, but usually you can sort of see the branch collar, and that's where you make your final cut. Okay, so there's different types of pruning, and sometimes it's just thinning things out for different reasons, but you don't want to do topping a tree or removing too much of the branches and doing what's called lion's tailing, and we'll show those. There's one other thing want to mention briefly is usually you prune the branches back to the main trunk or a secondary branch back to a larger branch, not leaving stubs. But there is another type of pruning called a reduction cut, where you want to reduce the size of the tree so you can turn a secondary branch into a primary branch by removing a portion of that primary branch. If you can see I'm not sure if you can see the area, this was a primary branch, and remove that, and now this secondary branch will take over, but you've reduced the size if it was for close to building or utility lines or something like that. So it's a different pruning cut, because usually you cut major branches or secondary branches back to major branches or the trunk, but a reduction cut is a bit different. You don't just top the trees, especially crepe myrtles. The crepe myrtles can be a nice looking tree if you don't top them every year, and topping really confuses the tree, causes the tree a lot of stress, and then you get a lot of sprouting, too many branches in too small an area, and you're making more problems for the tree and for yourself, because you're gonna have to do a lot of work years after the topping, with all the reaction that the tree will have and too many branches in too small an area. So you're gonna have a lot of cost and time you have to put in managing all that out of control branching and sprouting going on. So you don't top, besides that it just looks ugly, it stresses the tree, and it's hard for the tree to, especially a mature tree that was topped, it's hard for it to recover. And like mentioned in general, just with pruning, you don't do too much pruning, you keep it less than 25% of the leaf area, just so that you're not taking away too much of that food supply. If you're taking away leaves, you're taking away food supply. So in big wounds on trunk, if the tree was topped, it's very common that there'll be decay in that area, and you have diseases coming into the tree. Okay, the lion's tailing that mentioned is cleaning off that area, leaving those balls at the end, like the end of a lion's tail. A lot of tree companies, tree workers do that. They're the easiest branches to reach, and then some just think that it's the way you're supposed to do it, and then neighborhoods get started. Well, I want my tree to look like my neighbor's tree, but you're removing too much of that leaf production, the food production, and then you have sprouting because you removed all those trees, and you're going to have too many sprouts in one area, and they're not well attached or strong branches. Another thing that some companies have told me is that they do it because then the winds or hurricanes, strong winds, will pass through during a storm, but that's just totally wrong. What the winds do is grab the balls of the branches at the end, the leaves at the end, and whip it around and break more branches than if you'd left the intermediate branches. So with the picture with the trees cleaned out in the middle, you don't do that. You leave your natural branching just thinning out for the good reasons to prune, if you have rubbing branches, dead branches, or for safety or risk concerns. So no lion's tailing. You do the cut at the branch collar, not flush to the trunk. In the picture here, that's a flush cut to the trunk, and now you don't have the branch collar where it will form the callus and seal over the wound a lot better. And so the flush cut makes it a lot harder for the tree to recover. So you you prune at the branch collar, not flush to the trunk. And you don't leave stubs because that's just going to die and rot, and then you have more problems with diseases. And you make clean cuts, not leaving jagged things. That's just, you can see how that's for the tree to seal over with the callus. It's going to be a lot harder if it's not a nice clean cut, especially if the cut is clean, straight, and right at the branch collar. It'll seal over with that callus a lot better. Just want to mention, when you see trees with two trunks pretty much in a V shape, and you got two major trunks, you want one trunk and then secondary branching. And you have two equal trunks, that's called codominant trunks, and that's the joint where they join isn't strong, and you'll see that in storms, right? Everyone see that where you had those codominant trunks, and then during a storm, one of them just breaks right off. The best thing to do is when the tree is young, you remove one of the trunks and select the one that you want to be the single principal trunk, not leaving codominance. And if you do that when the tree is young, then it'll grow and form correctly. If you leave it too long, now in this picture, you've got two large trunks, and to remove one you'd be doing more damage than good. But if you have a house nearby, you've got a real risk because the one trunk, they're not strongly attached, and one trunk in a storm could fall on the house. So this should have been corrected when the tree was young and not left to this situation now. Okay, mentioned a few times about leaves and producing the food, and everyone's heard of photosynthesis. But just to go over it real briefly, I mean, we've got the sun giving the power, the energy for the process of photosynthesis and taking out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and that's good for the environment. And then water up from the roots, and the energy from the sun, and the photosynthesis produces glucose or carbohydrates or sugars. So that's all the same thing. The glucose is a sugar, and then also releases oxygen. And with the carbon that the tree absorbs, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, is where the tree produces its mass. With the tree trunk, it's like, what is the tree made of? Well, it's made from that carbon taken out of the air. And that's converted into the sugars, and that's used for growth, and that's where the tree gets its mass for trunk, branches, and growing the leaves. So that glucose is the same as carbohydrates, it's a sugar. And how's that used? And that is for growth. So the more leaves you leave, then the more food is being produced, the sugars, the carbohydrates, and that's where the tree gets the energy to grow. Okay, so with that, the photosynthesis is going on in the leaves, and mentioned that the water's coming up from the roots, and I think you also have an idea that roots absorb the water and nutrients in the soil, and that's in sap going up to the leaves, giving the water and the nutrients. And then there's also the sap that is with the sugars from the production in the photosynthesis. But with the sap, I mean, we've all heard and tasted and enjoyed maple syrup. Actually, other trees you can make syrup from. It's just maple trees are the best, and especially the sugar maple, just with how much sugar they have in the percentage in their sap. But the idea is that the sap flow in the trees is where you have the sugar from photosynthesis and also the water and nutrients going up. So there's two different sap systems going on in the tree. So I want to just go over this a little bit just so that you have an understanding of the importance of this sap flow. And then how we have to be careful not to damage, since these tubes, where the sap is flowing is not very far underneath the bark. And if we damage that area, then we're causing a lot of stress and problems or killing the tree. So there's two different types of tubes of sap flow. There's phloem, that's from the leaves that with photosynthesis produce the sugars, and that's putting those carbohydrates down out to branches, leaf growth, down to roots for root growth, and that's the energy. The soil has the water and the nutrients, and that sap flow is with xylem, and that's bringing it up. And in between the tubes of phloem and xylem is the cambium. So we're going to get to is being very careful not to damage those areas where that sap flow is going on, otherwise we kill the trees. So you have the bark, then the phloem. Cambium is the area that produces the phloem and the xylem. And the xylem, so you have phloem down with the sugars and xylem up with the water and nutrients. So if you cut into those with tools or weed eaters, then you can kill the tree. Cambium produces those layers of phloem and xylem. Weed eaters are dangerous. And cause some damage. If you're go all the way around the tree, you're going to kill the tree, and even some damage lets in a lot of disease and decay and can kill the tree just because you're cutting into those sap areas of the xylem and the phloem and cutting into the cambium that produces those. So the weed eaters, lawnmowers, tools around, shovels, digging around, weeding cause a lot of damage. If you have not grass up to the trunks, but mulch around the trunks, then you're going to do a lot better because you don't have tools near the trunk and causing that damage. So mulch is good. You don't want to mulch right at the trunk flare, just 5, 6 inches out from the trunk flare, and then mulching. The bigger the mulch circle, the better, and only 3, 4 inches of mulch. Like I say, the bigger the mulch circle that you can make, the better. Basically, the size of the crown is a good rule of thumb. If you can't make it that big, any size is better than nothing, and then you're keeping the weed eaters and mowers away from the trunk and the weeds, of course. Okay, so we don't want to kill the trees. We want to take care of that trunk, and especially the flare. So you see where trunks flare out, swell out, we're at the ground level, and that's real important, and we'll talk about that. The tree damage, tree planting, and tree mulching. So I mentioned that sap flow with the xylem and phloem. There's the tubes with the sap going up and down, and it's down in the phloem and up in the xylem up with the water and nutrients, the phloem down with the sugars. So being careful with the tools around the trunks causing damage. You cut into those tubes and you can kill the tree. If you cut all the way around, then the tree's dead for sure. Careful with weed eaters, mowers. Take some extra time. Shovels, not damaging that trunk area. It's real important not to cut into those areas that have the sap flowing up and down in the tree. So let's see if we can get another little video. Just with how you're using a weed eater and you think, well, I'll just get those weeds right there. A little bit of touching the trunk won't do that much damage, but you can see in the pictures how much damage there is. This is just a little video showing how fast the the trees, or how fast the weed eaters, the cords on the weed eaters can do damage. So it's not trees, but that's how much damage it's doing to the tree trunks, just when you're touching it a little bit. Okay, so yeah, be careful with the trees, especially tools around them, weed eaters. We don't want to kill them with all the benefits that we saw the trees give us for just even our economy, for our money, improving the value of our land in the cities, and in cities, towns, people enjoy shopping and spending more time around downtown areas if there's trees. So that's good for the economy also, being careful of the trees for just taking care of the earth and all the benefits they give us, and also with our health. So like I said, if you mulch around trees, that's good. Or you could plant some shrubs around trees so you don't have to do that weeding and weed eater, mowers, shovels, not working right around the trunks. Okay, now I want to do a little bit with planting in the trunk area of the trunk flare is really important to not plant. When you plant from a container, it's common that the root ball will sink down if the hole was dug too deep. Don't dig the hole any deeper than needed. That trunk flare should remain at ground level or even an inch or two above. And if you dig too deep, you got to fill it back in, but then stomp it down. You don't want that to settle and have that trunk flare. If that trunk flare is buried, then you're going to have soil all around the trunk, and the bark that bark isn't ready to be surrounded by soil, especially moist soil. It rots, and then you get the decay going into the trunk, and then you're getting into those areas where that sap flow is going with the xylem and phloem, and that'll kill the tree. So having that trunk flare at ground level, not buried lower. Sometimes it's been where a tree, the root ball is small and they want to dig it deeper hole so that they can fill the soil around it and it'll stand up. That's bad for the tree. You need that trunk flare at ground level or an inch or two above. Okay. All right. Mentioned already the importance of how good mulching is for the trees. Keep tools away and damage of the trunk, but also just it helps hold moisture in the soil, reduces the soil temperature, it reduces the weed competition. You get more rainwater, irrigation water going into the roots and used by the tree. And it also, with the mulch decomposing, you get good organic soil and better nutrients for the tree. So not too deep, not right up to the trunk, only 2, 3, 4 inches of mulch. And the wider, the bigger the circle, the better. If you can only have it small, at least it's better than nothing. And the grass up to the trunk, the tree and grass don't really get along. It's better with the mulch than the grass. And then again, you don't have the danger of cleaning or cutting grass and damaging the trunk. You don't want to build the mulch up like a volcano mulching around the trunk, because then that bark will rot and you get disease into the tree, into the trunk, and then you're cutting off those tubes with the xylem and phloem sap flow, and that will damage or kill the tree. So not piled up mulch, not mulch right at the trunk, and 3 or 4 inches of mulch. Okay, So we looked at the crown and the trunk, and now we'll look at the root system. Okay, tree root systems, and then there's a fungus going to talk about that grows on the roots. That's a good fungus. There's bad fungus for trees. There's also good fungus. And watering trees and trees in drought. And I can check the chat. How much time do we want to take a break in? A few more minutes is okay?
We decided we're not going to take a break. Just go ahead. You've got about 12 minutes left. So,
Okay. All right, so some people think that the root system of trees is like a mirror image of the crown, like the picture on the left. That's not true. The root systems aren't that deep, only a few feet deep and going out wider than the crown actually. A lot of times watering out at the crown is a good area, but the roots are actually out even farther. So roots aren't as deep as people think. The trees, when they're first growing young and there's the tap root and getting established, anchor roots. And then mostly the growth is just going out, not as deep as people think. And an important thing to consider is the roots only grow where there's oxygen and water. You can't just be saturated with water. It needs to be soil that is moist, but not saturated. The roots need oxygen and water. And so that's one reason they don't go as deep as people think. You get down deeper in certain soils and then there's no oxygen. So you have different types of roots. The small absorption roots out at the edge where the root zone is growing. The major woody lateral roots where it's also storing carbon and the sugars, carbohydrates from the photosynthesis. They're also stored in branches, trunk, and also in the woody lateral roots. You have a few anchor roots going a bit deeper, but most of the roots are growing out only a few feet deep, and the tap root stops growing on most trees. You just have a few anchor roots a bit deep, but it's not like a tap root going down the China that people think of a lot of times. And I mentioned the fungus that grows on the roots. It's not part of the tree. It's a separate fungus, grows on the roots, but helps a lot with the roots being able to absorb and take in water. They can take in a lot more water with the extra area that the fungus provides. And also there's certain minerals and nutrients that the fungus makes a lot more easy for the roots to absorb and use those nutrients. So the fungus does a lot of good, amazing amount of good for the roots. The Mycorrhizae fungus is naturally occurring. Usually you don't have to apply it. There are some products you can buy, but usually it's not needed. But just so you know that the root systems are growing in almost all plants, not just trees, most plants. 90% of all plants have mycorrhizae fungus growing on their roots. And they're so important that the sugars and carbohydrates the trees produce, plants produce, they feed that to the fungus because the fungus are doing so much good with helping them take in water and nutrients. So it's a good relationship between the fungus and the tree or the plant and the roots. Okay, so when you have containers and you have roots all bound up and swirling around, you'd have to prune those. It's not good if they're root bound or there's girdling, and when they grow larger in diameter, they're going to strangle the the tree will strangle itself. So you should prune those when it's taken out of the container, and do some rough up of the roots. That it's, if you have too many roots circling around in the container, it's better to be rough on them and prune and loosen them up than to just plant it as it is, and they're going to keep circling around and strangle themselves. So don't just plant right out of the container, do some major pruning. If you have large roots that you can't straighten out or loosen up, then you have to prune them off. So this isn't being delicate, it's being pretty rough and loosening those roots up that have been in a container. You don't want to water squirting like a sprinkler squirting the trunk. Like if you bury the trunk flare, you'll have rot and decay. If you spray it too much with a sprinkler, you'll have rot and decay. So you water out, not at the trunk, out where the root ball is, and as the tree's growing, out at the drip line or out at the edge of the canopy. Not squirting water with sprinklers right at the trunk. Okay, so when you're planting trees, you give like 5 gallons of water for every inch of diameter. So a 2-inch tree, hit it with 10 gallons of water, and then we'll go over how often water. You can overwater also. So underwatering or overwatering is a problem. Can be a problem. So the first month you want to water every other day. First month, like water 3 times a week, every other day. But if it's raining, that counts as one, so don't overwater. The second month, water twice a week. The third month, water once a week, and then you can cut back to just a couple of times a month, especially during the winter. The trees are dormant, don't need as much water, so once or twice a month is all they need after they've been established for the first year or two. And just now to go quickly over with some trees that are, we have our droughts. We just got some good rain around the coastal bend, but it's been 3-4 months with drought conditions. The trees can work through that. Gonna breeze through some of this with the way the leaves can close down. But there are some trees that do better with drought than others. So in the leaves, there's holes there called stomatas that open and close. So if there's not enough water coming up from the roots, they can close. The only problem is when they close, it can't be taking in the carbon dioxide and producing the food for the tree. But it's just interesting to know that there's these little holes called stomata that allow water to pass out. That's how it brings up the water from the roots, and also that's where the carbon dioxide goes in. Like I say though, when the stomata close, that can save water during drought, but it also means that the tree can't be producing the carbohydrates, the sugars. During drought, you don't want to fertilize. Fertilizer would stimulate growth. Right then you want the tree to just take care of itself and shut down as much as it needs to. You don't want to prune during a heavy drought. That causes reactions of the tree. And you don't want to be digging around, trenching or damaging roots, since that's where any water it can get needs to get through the roots. So during drought, not fertilizing, not pruning, not digging around the roots. So to end up on the picture on the left, that's roots that should have been pruned or taken care of when it was planted. Now that it's large, it's hard to fix. The next picture, second from the left, is if you look at that, you notice something looks funny. First, it doesn't have mulch around it or the grass growing right up to it is more competition for the tree, but you don't see the flare. So sometimes trees were planted right, but then there's landscaping and soil was filled in and that trunk flare was buried, and that's will rot that bark around there and damage the tree or kill the tree. The next picture is just extreme example, exaggerated, of piling up mulch, and that will rot the trunk or the bark and cause problems for the trees. That's just ridiculous and bad. The last picture with the people there is just a little bit scary, with people with shovels that close to little trunk and the damage that that could cause. Also, you see it's hard to see, but you can see the green tags and the bamboo stake. You want to remove that. People leave them on all the time, but that's strangling the tree just with those bands. So remove that. You only stake a tree when you're planting it if it's not able to stand up on its own. You don't have to stake a tree just because some people think I planted a tree, I have to stake it. You don't have to do that. You only stake if you need to. And that's it. How are we doing for time, Kevin?
We are at 3:30, Bill.
I don't know. I haven't looked at the chat though. Is there any questions or?
We've not had any questions so far, so you must have done a really good job.
Yeah, there's no questions from the Port A crew.
So I think you're good, Bill.
Well, I hope so.
Bill, thank you so much. That was really, really helpful.
I think he did a really great job covering weed eater damage and talking about how trees heal over and all of that. We want to thank you for coming today and taking the time to do this for our groups. And hopefully at some point we'll be able to meet in person instead of having to do this virtually, and we can actually do some demonstrations and things as well. So we hope that you'll consider coming back and doing another program for us. So
yeah, with Ray and Port Aransas anytime. I mean, I've been in Port Aransas a lot. Ray knows I can get up there and help with the crews, and being in person and outside and with the trees is a lot better. So we can do that anytime.
Yeah.
Right?
all right.
Yeah, the next pepper tree work day, we should maybe do some demonstration or
Right.
find some examples around town.
Yep, good.
So thank
Sarah,
you so
you
much.
have anything to say? No, you're good.
No?
All right,
Thanks so much, Bill.
thank you all for participating, and we hope that the program was informational for you and that you've learned something from it. And we look forward to the second Tuesday in July. So the second Friday in July, sorry, at 2:30. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Thanks for